Hello and welcome to this Git tutorial. Today I'd like to show you how Git can make you a better vibe coder. So let's get into it. Alright, so this class will be divided in 3 lessons in 3 different videos. And so we're going to start with lesson 1, just getting to know what Git is and how it can help you in general become a better vibe coder. So what is Git? Git is version control. Think about it as you're playing a video game and you reach a save point, you save your game, and then you go, you keep going through the game and then you die, or you lose a precious item that you didn't want to use, or things like that, and you just reload your game and start over, right? So Git is something similar that allows you to do that with code, with your application that you're building. It's a great way to protect your code from the AI as well, because AI can generate good code, can generate your application for you, but sometimes once you start adding new functionality, AI will go and mess things up. That happens all the time, and you have two choices at that point. You can decide to either use the AI to try to fix the problem that the AI created, or you can try to go back in time, which is what we're going to do with Git. You're making changes to your code and you get to a good stopping point. Your app works. There's not a whole lot of issues to work on. You're ready for the next step. But when you ask the AI to create the next step or to code the functionality for the next step, the AI gets confused and starts messing things up and creating problems for you. This happens all the time. So Git is a great way to revert those bad changes and come back to the previous version of the code and the application that you were happy with. It also allows you to collaborate on the code base with other people, which may or may not be your case as a vibe coder. But also it will allow you to work with collaborators. If you and I are both working on the same file, Git will let us merge our work together in a way that is non-destructive. So before we get started, I just want to mention that Git works on the concept of having a repository. So on your machine, on your project, you're going to create a Git repo, which is short for repository. With that Git repo, Git is going to start tracking the changes that you make to all your files. So your files are going to have some changes that you're making. You're adding code, removing code, you're moving files, renaming files, you're deleting files, splitting files, merging files. Git tracks of all these little changes that you're doing to the code, and that's how it knows how to go back. It can simply undo those changes one at a time. So one of the first things that we're going to do when we start working with Git is create that initial Git repository which lives on your machine. So take a look at this slide where you can see a couple of milestones that were added on this kind of vertical line here that goes from left to right. Usually you start with your initial version of the application. It can be an empty Git directory, or it can be the first kind of generated app that you just created. You create a commit, and that commit is this new milestone, and you can give it a message. In this case, it's a version number plus a quick description. For the simplicity of just building a slide, this is like sufficient. But normally you want your message to be a bit more complex, and we'll get into that later. But the first commit here is your initial commit. And then we fix a bug. And so we work on fixing that bug, and when we're happy that the bug has been fixed, we create a other commit. Right here, we put a message on it to indicate what we've been working on. And then after that, we work on a new feature, and then we commit that, and then a major update, and we commit that, and so on and so forth. And so this is this timeline of milestones that we're going to be building with Git. So this line here is called a branch. Every single Git repository will have a single branch. Git defaults the naming of the branch to master, so you'll hear me say a lot the master branch. And then on GitHub, if you use those kind of central Git repositories on the internet, GitHub's a popular one. GitHub will default to calling the main branch main. Let's get started. Let's build a repository. I'm here in the terminal. If you don't know the terminal, that is fine. You don't need to know it. I will also show you how to do this in Visual Studio Code. But the first thing that we want to do here once Git has been installed, and I encourage you to go on the internet and Google that, how to install Git. We're going to initialize the Git repository, and it's always this, it's git init. I'm not going to press return right off the bat because I want to show you as well how you do this in Visual Studio Code. So here we are in Visual Studio Code. I am in my teach Git directory here where we're going to be working. To start a new repository in here, you come here to the source control little icon, and then it'll say the folder currently open does not have a Git repository. You can initialize a repository which will enable source control features powered by Git. And so you can click on this initialize repository and it'll do the same thing as the command line except from here. So I'm going to click it from here, and boom, we have a Git repository that has been created. So let's go back to here. I don't need to do the Git. Actually, if I type Git init, it'll tell you that it's reinitializing a new one. So it created a branch. I've got my prompt here set up so that I can see the Git branch that I'm currently in. It's called main. So that means that Visual Studio Code defaulted to using main as the main branch name. If I go somewhere else, if I do Git init, see now it called the branch master. So Git defaults to master, and then Visual Studio Code defaults to main. So let's go back to the main directory, teach Git, and here I'm going to initialize a Claude session, and we're going to build an app real quick. I use Claude on the terminal a lot more. You could use it, you could use Claude Cowork, you could use Claude Web, whatever you want to use, or you can use Codex, you can use Copilot, you can use Gemini, anything that you want to use to create your app. I want to build a simple to-do application that is web-based, where I can create to-do items. I do not need to save the to-do items between page loads, just to keep it simple. All right, let's do this. I'm probably going to pause this real quick and come back to you after Claude is done building this. Okay, looks like it's done. It took a while, about 15 minutes, but I did ask for a very complex project. Let's run it and see how it looks like. I have no idea. The server is running. Let's go check it out. Can I click on? Here it is, the to-do app. Ta-da! Let's try adding a to-do. Show how great Git is. All right. So yeah, it works. I'm pretty happy with that. So far, everything seems to be fine. I can add to-do items, I can check off to-do items, and I can delete them. So this is great. I'm going to do a commit. We're going to put that in Git and keep it forever, okay? Claude committed to Git as it went. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. Just in case you're using, cursor or something similar to that, you can go here in the source control tab here, and you can see all the changes that were made and committed to Git. Remember that slide where I showed you, here, let me show it to you again, where we had this timeline of Git commits, right? So now we have the same thing over here, but it's like vertical instead of horizontal. So you can see here the list of changes that were made, the list of commits that were made to Git. And when you click on each one of these, well, first of all, you'll see here on the screen that it says the author, that's me, 15 minutes ago. Add to-do app implementation plan. Then it added Vite and React to the project. And so it created all these files over here. Then add to-do item component with tests. So it created this to-do item component and it created some tests for it. Then it created a to-do form. Then it created a to-do list. Then it wired up the app with state management and all components. And then it added styling for the application. So all of these are good commits. Let's go add a new change ourselves. We're going to go to the terminal, back in Cloud Code, and I will say I don't like the color scheme. Please use my color palette as seen in this HTML file. And then I went and copy pasted that in here because I already, that's the colors of the website, the DevJoy Studio website. So let's try to use that. And there it goes, just changing things. Okay, it's done. So here you go. You can see now that our colors have been changed. Let's add a to-do item, commit this color theme. Okay, so now we're going to do this. We can commit. And what you can do here in Visual Studio is you'll see we're still in that section over here, source control section. It'll tell you there are two changes. One of them is some kind of Cloud Code permission file because I gave him permission to do something. So it had to change this file. And the other one is the colors for the website. That's another benefit from using Git is you can see what changed, what is the old file and what is the new file. Well, first of all, let's do something real quick because I don't want to commit both of these at the same time. What I want to do is commit each independently because those are two different changes. The reason I want to do that is if one day I decide that I don't like this new color palette and I want to undo the changes in this commit, if I lumped in the Cloud permission changes as part of this commit, when I undo the commit, it'll undo all the changes in the commit, including the Cloud permission changes that I've made. So it's important to keep them independent from one another. Your commits should only encapsulate changes that are related to one another. So how do we do that? Let's go through the workflow of committing something. In the Git workflow of a single commit, you have your working directory with all your files and you have all the changes that have been made. Then you have a staging area. I want to stage all the changes that I want to commit. And then I do the commit and put those changes into the repository. So let's go do that. I'm going to stage the local Claude changes right here. And I can do that with this little plus sign over here. See the tooltip that showed up says stage changes. If I was on the terminal, git status, git status. And the git status command tells me what has changed and then gives me little hints here if I want to stage files, and I can also remove files from being staged. So I can say git add .claude, and that'll stage all the files within the .claude directory, or I can specify the file specifically. So now I staged the .claude settings file, and I can show you that it looks like this. If I do git status again, we are on the main branch. The changes to be committed are the settings file for Claude. Changes not staged for commit is the CSS file where I changed the colors. Okay, let's look at Visual Studio Code and how it deals with that. Here, now you see staged changes. My settings.json file has been staged. I can unstage it, just press the minus icon, and I can restage it. It's pretty straightforward. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is the git ignore. Git ignore is pretty important because there are files you don't want to commit that you want to avoid putting on the internet. API keys and secret is a big one. API keys and secrets are your credentials to some services. You don't want anybody on the internet to be able to see that. If you're pushing your Git repository to GitHub, it will push those API keys and secrets, and they will be obvious to anybody, and anybody will be able to impersonate you. You don't want that, obviously. So we're gonna git ignore all those Git API keys and secrets. You also want to git ignore compiled files. Those files are compiled from your source code. The source code is already in Git. If you want to recover the compiled files, just recompile it. You don't need to keep track of the changes made to compiled files. Dependencies. You don't need to add dependencies to Git. You need to add the list of dependencies that you have, but the dependencies themselves downloaded from the internet, you don't need that. You can always refetch them later if you need them again. And also temporary files, completely not needed. So if we go back to Visual Studio over here, and we go to the Explorer to see all our files, you see this git ignore file was added. When you create a Git repository the first time, it is very possible that it will not be there. You will need to add it yourself. You can always ask Claude or whatever AI you're using to create that git ignore file based on the tech stack that you're using. Log files over here are not needed. Node modules are not needed. Dist is usually short for distribution, which is a location on the disk where all the binary files are going to be installed, all the compiled files are going to be installed. As I said earlier, we don't need to store that, and so we're going to ignore anything in there. Now, if I take all of this and delete it, and I save the file, look what happened in Git. Now we have 7,000 files that have changed. 7,000 files. That is a lot of files. 7,500 changes. We don't need that. So I'm just going to bring the git ignore back to what it was. And then now we only have 2 changes. Here, now you see staged changes. My settings.json file has been staged. I can unstage it. Just press the minus icon and I can restage it. It's pretty straightforward, okay? And then those are the changes that are not staged for commits. Now I want to commit this. I can either do it on the command line. I can either do it here in Visual Studio Code. I can do it in the GitHub desktop application. I can ask Claude to do it for me at the cost of a couple of tokens. It's usually a lot faster to do it yourself. So I'm going to go into messages and say, Claude setting files are updated. And I commit. Boom. Now we only have one set of changes left, and it's the app.css file. I'm going to stage this change. I like the colors, and I'll say Dev Joy Studio color palette is used. And commit that. Boom. So now I have it here. I have my last commit, and you can see that it's only changing the CSS file. And I have the Claude setting files commit, which only changed the settings file and all the previous one. Okay. So what I want to do now, let's try now to change the colors again to something completely disgusting, completely outrageous. Change the colors again to something that is not pleasing to the eye. Add a title that's to the page that says gross. Let's check it out. It is pretty gross. You see that Claude added the gross title and changed the colors. This is not what I want. And in the next lesson, this is what we're going to be working on. We are going to undo this change. So now exercise time. Now it's your turn. I want you to go on your machine, create a project, or in a project that you already have and do not have a Git repository for. I want you to go in there and initialize a Git repository, okay? For your project or for a to-do app project. I say to-do app projects because those are usually very easy to create the first time. I want you to create a git ignore file if it doesn't exist already. I want you to go in there and exclude secrets, node modules, whatever, okay? If you don't know how to do that, just ask your AI to do it for you. Oh, AI, what should I be ignoring for this Git repo, and can you add that to the git ignore file? It'll do that for you. I want you to make then 3 sets of changes, 3 sets of independent changes, changing the color, changing your Claude settings, changing whatever, and make 3 commits, okay? So you're gonna stage the files and then you're gonna commit them each one at a time. And then use git status and git log after each commit just to get her to play with it a little bit, okay? So do those exercises, and by the time you're done with that, maybe I'll be done with my next video.